Thanks for tuning in to Adiscope, episode number 70, Becoming a World Champion, an interview with Tatyana McFadden. She shared with me her incredible story from growing up in a Russian orphanage with spina bifida, being paralyzed from the waist down, all the way to becoming a Paralympic gold medalist multiple times and the current world champion title holder.
Sports marketing expert Brian Cristiano.
Brian Cristiano.
Sports fans are arguably the most passionate people probably on the face of this planet.
Marketers and advertisers and brands always have to keep in mind, you have to play to the state of your audience.
If you're not passionate, do something else.
Tatyana McFadden has beaten the odds, pushed the boundaries of physical and mental success. She's a 4-time Paralympian in both the Summer and Winter Games. She's a multi-time gold medalist and the only athlete ever in any category to win the Boston, London, Chicago, and New York City marathons in the same year, and she's done that 3 years in a row. Outside of sports, she's credited with the passage of athletics equality acts in both Maryland and on the federal level. She's currently training for the Rio Paralympics in 2016, and she gave me some insights into her story, her motivation, and her incredible success. I gave her a list of some of her accomplishments, and this was her reaction. When I list those accomplishments, how does that make you feel?
It's quite amazing. I've achieved a lot, and I absolutely love what I just love what I do, and I'm having so much fun, and I'm only 26 years old, so hopefully things will keep going up, and I hopefully will continue to do what I love because I'm healthy, and it's all really, really exciting.
Yeah, quite a lot in 26 years. It's really amazing. It's quite a long list, and that's not even everything. I mean, I'm just summarizing. But what kind of training does it take to compete at such an elite level?
That's a great question. Training is 2 times a day. We put in well over 100 miles a week. We live twice a week. And I really feel that my life is Groundhog's Day. I wake up and I go straight to training, and I come back and, have a meal and get ready for the second session. And so it's pretty tough. We have about 3-week period of training cycles, and each training cycle we may focus on something different. In the winter we really focus on power and strength building, and when we transition and get ready for the marathons, we really focus on the endurance and the distance part of it. And hopefully by the summer everything kind of comes together. We may work on a little bit more of the sprinting and working on the starts for athletes who also do the 100 meters like myself. And so having that full year of training, everything slowly comes together and meshes together really, really nicely.
When you're at your peak training volume, just to kind of put it in perspective, to how much work that it goes into being an elite athlete at your level and to win, how many hours a day do you train? You're doing 2 days, but how many hours on like a peak training week?
I would say it's about, it can be up to about, 4 hours a day, 3 to 4 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning, and then 2 hours in the afternoon. And it's pretty tough. Those days are really long days. I'm in bed sometimes by like 8:30, and I feel like grandma, but it's all that training. But that training is really important because this year is the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and to have that stress build up and to have that amount of endurance in one amount of week will really help you to prepare for the Paralympic Games, where I'll be competing either once a day or even twice a day. And since I'll be doing the events from the 100 meter all the way through the marathon, some days I'll be competing twice a day, but I've already had practice doing that. So that's the really importance of why we do this and why we put in a lot amount of time in training and focus on specific events.
And just to clarify, you're the first athlete ever to attempt to do all the track and field events.
Yes, I am. I'll be the first athlete in history, Olympic and Paralympics, to try to achieve all events. And I'm really, really excited about that. I have a passion for racing, and, it doesn't matter what distance it is, from the 100 all the way to the marathon. They're all very different, event focused, specific, but I just love what I do, and I'm really, really excited for Rio.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm going to take a quick step back. So you were born with spina bifida, you're paralyzed from the waist down, you compete in these races with the use of a wheelchair. Are there any advantages or disadvantages, I'm sure there's both, to having to using a chair?
Well, I think one question that comes up a lot is that, we're compared to hand cyclists, but we're not. We're very different from hand cyclists. For wheelchair racing, it's all with our upper body. There's no gears. However fast I'm going that day, however fast I'm going, my arms are my own gears. And I think that's a little of the misconception that people may have, because when they see a racing chair, it's 3 wheels, 2 in the back and 1 in the front, and they see, steering in the front. But that steering in the front is to help us turn on the roads, either left or right. And then below that, we have steering to help us to turn left on the track and then straight again. And so sometimes, I feel like people are a little bit confused when they see a racing chair and then see a hand cyclist. But I feel like if you got into a racing chair, you would find it very, very difficult because it takes a lot of power and a lot of arm muscle. It's like runners. They're trained to run miles and miles and miles on their legs. And for me, I don't see any difference. It's what I've grown up doing. And so all my strengths are specifically in the core and upper body and back muscles. And so it's no disadvantage or advantage. We all compete in the same racing chair. We all compete in the same weather, and it just comes down to whoever is the strongest that day and plays the race really, really smart.
So when it's race day, you're in the racing chair. Paint me a picture of what it's like in the race from your perspective. Start of the race, mid-race, end of the race, whatever. What sticks out to you the most from your perspective when you're racing?
When I'm racing, from getting into my racing chair, I just think about my game plan and just try to relax and to have fun. Sometimes you get really nervous, but all the training I've done beforehand, and so I it's just me time and to focus on and myself and to focus on my goals for the race and what I want to accomplish that day, and think about weather conditions and just my routine, and did I wake up and eat the things that I normally would eat before a marathon, and just going through that routine and check my bag twice and then hopping into the racing chair and really just executing on the entire race. And when that gun goes off, you're off and you're racing. And during the race, you focus on where your competitors are, where you are in the race, how exhausted you are and how much energy that you have, your strength and weaknesses versus their strength and weaknesses. And, by the time you, as the race goes on, you finish towards near the end of the race, think about tactics, you hear with other racers. And so, you're constantly thinking from the moment you wake up for a race all the way until it finishes.
One thing I want to discuss, and I'm curious on your take on this. I think there's a lot of people who misunderstand or aren't sure how to talk about disabilities, what they should or shouldn't say, especially when it comes to sports. And do you find that to be true? And then what would you like for people to understand better?
I think I think Paralympics and disability sport is evolving, and it's changing for the better because of media and social media, and the Paralympics are on TV for the first time because of NBC. And I think when they realize that, when they see the sport, and if we take them into, when we talk about our training, I think society is starting to realize, they're just like any elite athlete training for a Paralympic Games. And, when I talk about my training and, when Med talks about their training, we're pretty much on the same training cycle sometimes, and we do the same amount of distance, and, and the lifts, my lifts are probably, are more core and arm specific, where his are leg specific. And I think it's that, that little misconception there. But it's just teaching society, and showing videos of training and a little bit of what I do and talk about the racing chair and the training. So I think that a little bit of that misconception.
As you see maybe their perspective starting to change and people understand it a little more clearly, like you explained, what do you think that changes in the long run?
That what we do is hard. It's just like any marathoner. When they want to come in and run a marathon, they know how hard training is for the first time for a marathon. And training is my job. And being an elite wheelchair racer and Paralympic athlete, that is my job full time, 24/7. That's all I do is training. And I think that's, it's hard. It's not easy some days. Some days it's like, it's raining outside. I really don't want to go outside and push. It's 32 degrees. I'm going to freeze out there. And it's going to be so hard getting out there first. But, you take a step back and you think about, why you're doing this and why you love it. And I think that's what people are starting to realize when they get to know an athlete and their daily routines. And, that circles back to social media. People can find me, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter, and kind of go through a day life of me and what I do. And I think that they start to see, what I go through every day.
Yeah, well, you're out there putting in the work, obviously getting incredible athletic results, and you have some great sponsors that have come on board over the years. You have Coke, Nike, BP, Liberty Mutual, BMW. Those are at least the ones that I know. How did these sponsorships come about?
That's a great question. Sponsorship has definitely evolved over the years. In starting in 2004, I only had a chair sponsorship and a Hilton sponsorship, and in 2008 I had a chair sponsorship and Athletic Works wear sponsorship, and I was on a McDonald's cup. But sponsorships were very limited for Paralympians, and I think that that's changing now, and they're starting to realize that, the story that Paralympians have and the journeys that we have taken and how far we've come. And, without sponsorships, I would not be number one in the world. It would be very, very hard because, a wheelchair, a racing chair costs just about $5,000 just the frame itself. And then you have wheels, which are $2,000 each. So you have 3 of them. And then you have tires over that. And those are about $250 a piece. In 1 week I went through 6. And that's why sponsorships are important. They help me through training and to travel. And, I can really focus on living and training at the same time, which is really important for athletes. And I think that, I'm so happy that, it's changing and that people want to see Paralympic sport. And I think that really helps the growth and the movement of that. And I think sponsorships are, coming out because of that. And I think that, one of my very first big sponsorships with BP, I think they really gave me access for that. And they really treated the Olympians and the Paralympians the same way. And they're just so classy in that way. And I think that other sponsors are starting to follow behind that.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next, which is, are sponsors coming to you and or other athletes, maybe in the Paralympics, Paralympians, that they're specifically coming to you because you're a Paralympian, or are they coming to you because you're an elite athlete and they're looking at you the same that they would look at any other athlete? Or is that evolving? Has it changed over time?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changing over time. I think that when BP approached me, they approached me as an elite athlete, and they approached me because of my accomplishments and because I have a great story to tell. it's just, I think that's why, stories are so important because we're relatable. I didn't join track because I was fast. I joined sports because it was a way for me to get healthy. And later in life, I really fell in love with sports, and that drove me to have dreams and goals later in life. And I feel like I'm more relatable to society in that way. I just didn't pick up a sport because I was good at it or because my brother and sister did it. And so, just being able to share the story with society is so important because you never know what person's going through something, a challenge in your own life. And I think people can be kind of inspired that way to kind of hurdle over their own personal challenges when they see Paralympic athletes.
Well, it's great to hear that brands are moving in that direction because I think that's important, and sponsorship is very important, especially track and field. And we're seeing some brands, like you mentioned, that are going in that direction and are just looking for good athletes or people with really good stories or that are inspirational, which is the way to do it. But there's still a lot of brands that may sponsor either Olympic athletes or other professional athletes that just are absent in the Paralympic Games, or other athletes with disabilities. Are they missing out on an opportunity?
Of course, we're great people. Yeah. But time is coming, and I think that companies are changing. It's just a matter of time. And it's that movement since 2004 to now has changed drastically. And I think that companies are starting to see that, and they're starting to realize that. And I'm really excited to what has in store for the future. I'm only 26 years old, and I'm still really, really young in the track profession. I have many more years to go. For wheelchair racing, I don't hit my peak until I'm about 30, mid-30s. So I still have a long way to go, and I'm really excited to see what that journey has ahead of me and what other, the growth of the Paralympic movement, the growth of track and marathons. I think they've just blossomed so far, and I'm excited to see what will happen in the future.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It seems like it's at least heading in the right direction, which is great.
Yeah.
All right, I'll take it back again. So you've had an incredible story. The first 6 years of your life were in a Russian orphanage, virtually like nothing. You didn't even have a wheelchair. Doctors were worried about that you were too weak, about your health was very serious. Your mom adopted you and started getting you involved in different sports just to build you up physically and kind of improve your health. She said that you took to sports very quickly and you loved it. Let's fast forward 20 years and now you're a world champion. To say you've overcome the odds is an incredible understatement. What is it inside of you that has pushed you not only to just survive, but to become the best in the world and do what you do on a day-to-day basis?
That's a great question. I think, growing up and living in an orphanage, I've always had a certain attitude. And it was kind of an attitude of a Russian phrase called yasama, which means back off, I can do it, and I can do it myself. And I've always been independent that way, and I've always figured out ways to overcome challenges. So when I didn't have a wheelchair, I learned to walk on my hands or to crawl around. And some people think I built strength that way, but for me, it was just a way of getting around. And I've put that into just living life daily, whatever challenges come ahead, even in school or starting sports. I just have that certain drive and certain work ethic, and to if I can, I can do it, and I want to do it very well. And I think that I've always carried that ever since I was a young girl to even now. And it's really important to have that in training and to work ethics, because some days are going to be good and some days are going to be bad.
Do you view yourself as a success story?
I really think I do. When I went back to the orphanage in 2011, I went on a very private trip after the London Marathon. I told my mom I wanted to go back, and she said, well, we're in London. It's like, yeah, well, we crossed that big ocean. She's like, I know how much further we is. And going back, and it was the first time ever that someone went back to the orphanage, let alone someone with a disability. And it was a way of teaching them that, you know, I am a success story, and that, you know, people with disabilities can live normal lives. And so I really, really do believe that in a success story, and to be able to share that back with the orphanage and orphanage director, and you know, even Renee with my birth mom in 2011, you know, she had to do the hardest part as a birth mom, was to get me out for hoping for a better life, and so that's a success story in itself right there as well. And yeah, so I really do believe that, you know, that, you know, things happen, and yeah, I would say so.
A lot of people look at you as the voice or the face, you know, behind the movement and really helping bring to light and more information and the betterment of people with disabilities, both on the athletic side and just in general. Is that something you own? Is there a lot of pressure to be looked at in that way, to kind of be holding that on your shoulders?
No, there's no pressure. I just kind of live my life and share it, you know. And I think that people are really interested and gravitate to that as well, and speaking at schools and hospitals, and just really being able to share my story. I think that, you know, it kind of unwinds in itself, you know. But I do believe that as an elite athlete and an elite athlete with disability, you know, you do have a little bit of that role. But, you know, I'm just living life normally, and so there's no pressure.
That's amazing, and you give back so much. When you hear the word disability, what do you think? Or what's your reaction?
My reaction is always take out the dis and disability and just have it ability. You know, I think that we're all able to do something if we desire to.
If you could tell one thing to somebody struggling, like they feel like they have a disadvantage in life, whatever that may be, and they were struggling deeply with some sort of challenge, physical or other, what would you tell them? What would you want them to know?
You know, I really, you know, we all go through certain struggles, and but it's finding ways to overcome them and really understanding yourself, or, you know, looking at stories by others, but not to give up. You know, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm done, you know, life is too hard, I'm going to go sit in the corner, and but life should be lived always, and lived with fulfillment. And, you know, you can't do that if you hold yourself back.
What's one perception you wish you could change about athletes or people that have disabilities?
One perception. You know, when people look at me, I want them to be inspired by, you know, the person that I am, and not what they see. You know, I don't want them to be inspired by because I'm a girl in a wheelchair, you know, rolling down the street. I want them to be inspired because of how strong, and by my accomplishments and what I've done in the marathon world and for the Paralympics, and my journey as an elite athlete in itself.
You inspire so many people, and there's a lot of people that look up to you. You have an incredible story. You've done so much. Who inspires you?
I would say, you know, my family. They've always believed in my craziest dreams. You know, they've always told me that my dreams are never too big, or my ambitions are never too practical. And so I think that's always stuck with me. You know, whatever I want to do, they are 100% behind me.
Amazing. What's next for Tatyana? What are your goals? What's coming? You're only 26 years old. You've accomplished so many things. What's next?
The Olympics. That's right around the corner. So I'm really just focusing on that each and every day, putting the time in training. And unfortunately, you know, hardly no vacations this year, so it's just really focusing on training, and I'm taking a class this semester, so just to have that nice balance. I'm trying to finish up my master's program. So that's what lays ahead in the future. Just really focusing on this year.
Amazing. Well, it's an exciting and busy year, and I'm going to be excited to watch, watch how it goes at the Olympics, Paralympics for you. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I think this was really amazing. Give everybody some insight into who you are.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been lucky enough to see Tatyana win the New York City Marathon in person the last couple of years. She's an absolutely amazing athlete and a really incredible human being, and I'm excited to see what she does at the Rio Paralympics this summer. If you liked this episode and this interview, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and tune in to the next Out of Scope.